My friends, second night in a row without American strikes on Iran. For 13 days, the American statement was released every dawn, and in the last 2 nights, absolutely nothing came out. And today, the reason emerged, or at least the official explanation for it. The American press reported that President Trump shelved the broad operation against Iran because of something that nobody puts on a campaign poster. And stock of air defense interceptors in the Middle East, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff privately warned that it's possible to resume heavy strikes, in other words, total war. It's possible to do that, but that this would leave Central Command with a dangerously low air defense reserve. Notice this detail that few are connecting. Analysts here in the Middle East region are pointing out the name that reappeared exactly on the day the offensive was cancelled. On Friday, the American Vice President Vance, the same man who disappeared from the news during the 13 nights of fire, and on the other side, the Iranian army confirmed today that it has also stopped attacking. And the Shiite Axis channels are spreading the American report about the lack of interceptors as if it were a war trophy. All this in the last 24 hours. Stay with me until the end, because this story, the way it's being presented, there's something fishy about it, and what's behind it, it's more serious than just a lack of stock. And at the end, I'll show you the piece almost no one saw, what happened in the Caspian Sea. Yesterday I mentioned this briefly, today I came back with a few more details. It became Iran's first official reaction against Ukraine. Live from Israel, where it all happens. Let's go back 24 hours. Because today, right, what happens today only makes sense based on what happened yesterday. Local time in Israel, 1:40 p.m. on the 26th. It's Sunday for you guys too. And yesterday I told you that the board had split in half. On one side, the United States-Iran axis is freezing up. And on the other side, the Red Sea is on fire. And today the freezing continues, and now it has an explanation in writing. Now here's a 30-second summary for those who are just parachuting into this topic, because without this, the rest of the video won't make sense to you. Pay attention, everyone. An interceptor is not an attack missile. Some people are writing that an interceptor is an attack missile, but it's not. An interceptor is the missile that goes up, right? It's launched to shoot down the enemy's missile. It goes there and gets close to it or collides with it in the sky. Sometimes it can also hit from the side. It takes down the enemy missile. It's the shield. It's what protects the American base, the Saudi Arabian refinery, Israeli cities. That's it, folks. It's the shield. And it has a feature that changes all of this. It's very expensive, folks. It's slow to manufacture. And it's used up in seconds. And here I need to bring up a conversation I've already had with you in a previous video. For those who remember this, I said that this dispute deep down isn't decided in the sky. It's decided by money on the spreadsheet. Does anyone remember that? If you do, comment that you remember our discussion here. Check the numbers and you'll see why, guys. Of these drones, let me put an image here so you can take a look at this. One of these Iranian drones flying toward American bases costs on average between $20,000 and $50,000. Some say it's even less than that. The engine is very simple, it's a very common part, and the structure is extremely light. The interceptor that goes up to take down this drone costs, depending on the model, between $3 and $7 million. Look at the amount of money, guys. Millions of dollars against $20,000. And almost never does a single interceptor go up. They launch 2, sometimes 3, just to make sure that this drone or this missile doesn't fall anywhere. The analysis center did that calculation. And if Iran launches, for example, 200 of these drones in just 1 month, it spends between $4 and maybe $6 million. And shooting down these same 200 with the American shield cost close to $1 billion and $600 million in the same month, $10 million on one side and $1.5 billion on the other. And Iran, my friends, manufactures these drones by the thousands, while the American factory delivers this shield by the hundreds. Hundreds only per year, folks. This is exactly the calculation I showed you in that earlier video. And that's what's tying Washington's hands right now. Before I began this, I was already doing it and discussing it. The Western mindset is to sell everything at high prices while the other side produces everything so cheaply. It's not a lack of courage, it's about cash, it's about money. No country in the world can sustain that kind of cost imbalance for very long. Not even Brazil or the United States as they are now. The enemy attacks on the cheap and you pay dearly to shoot it down. And he knows that better than anyone. And that's what's at the center of today's news. Let's get to the basic facts first. Second consecutive night with no statement on the American operation against Iran. Nothing. There were explosions in the Bandar Abbas region, but it wasn't the Americans. Nothing was reported by the American government or by CENTCOM. There was no announcement, there was no list of targets, there was nothing. And today the spokesperson for the Iranian army spoke publicly and said that Iran also suspended its responses because the Americans stopped for 2 nights. In other words, officially Iran is not attacking anywhere. So pay attention to what this really means. Both sides are now openly admitting that their fingers are literally off the trigger. This is still not an agreement, guys. It's not an agreement. There's no paper, no signature, no meeting date, no name. There's nothing, guys. But it's the first time in 2 weeks that both clocks stop together and both sides confirm it. And there's more, okay? It didn't end there. There's a lot, guys. Stay with me until the end of this video and smash that like button. I know you just forgot to do it. So go ahead, go there and hit the like button, guys. The spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry confirmed today that there were several rounds of talks in Tehran on Friday and Saturday with Oman's deputy foreign ministers. Look at what he said. Quote, both sides exchange points of view. Points of view on common principles and operational mechanisms to manage safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz, respecting the sovereign rights of the 2 coastal countries. End quote. Behind that extremely polite phrase, there's just one question. Who controls the world's oil gateway, folks? Who is it? Who's in charge? He said there was progress, that the Oman delegation has already left, and that technical consultations are ongoing. And he also said that traffic in the strait continues exactly as it was. Nothing has changed. In other words, under Iranian control. Although the United States denies it, and then the outline of what's being put together behind the scenes appears. According to the international press, both sides want to return to the previous temporary agreement, and the format under consideration is for Iran to supervise the passage of ships with much fewer restrictions for those passing through. In other words, let's go. Let them pass. More than before, something like that. Let's look at how their formula is put together. Iran doesn't need to tell its own people that it lost the strait. It completely lost the strait. And the US side doesn't need to say it accepted Iranian control over the strait. Each one leaves the table with a phrase to sell at home. That's the truth. Meanwhile, Trump himself warned that the US military remains armed and ready, and that the decision about a new wave still hasn't been made. One hand on the table and the other on the trigger, as always, folks. And now comes the toughest part of the day, and this is where things get bigger, because the fighting really did stop, folks. The American press reported today that the president shelved the broad campaign against Iran after a meeting at the White House on Friday with top advisors and military chiefs in the room. And what brought all this to a halt wasn't diplomacy, okay? It was military bookkeeping. The chief of staff privately warned that resuming large-scale operations is possible from a military standpoint, but the price is depleting the stock of interceptors available to Central Command in the Middle East. And here I need to give you some numbers, 3 numbers, so you can understand the size of this hole. First number, the American factory that makes these interceptors delivered just over 600 units in the entire last year. 600 units of interceptors, folks. That means for each drone, sometimes they fire two of these interceptors. The whole year. Second number, in the first days of the confrontation with Iran. Early in the year, the coalition used more interceptors daily than the factory makes in months. That is, what they used in a day, the factory can't replenish that in several months. An American research center calculated that the entire campaign consumed something between 1,000 and 1,400 interceptors, nearly half of the entire American stockpile that existed before the conflict. Third number, and this one is the most important, the combined stockpile of the Gulf allies and Israel dropped by about 86 during that 40-day campaign. And the new production line, the one that was hastily contracted during the 40-day war, will only really start delivering in 2 years. Guys, how do you win a war like that? So the picture is very clear, guys. The Americans have plenty of attack missiles. They have a lot of offensive missiles. They can fight for 3, 4, 5 years without any problems. No problem at all. Planes, no problem at all. They have plenty of planes. Aircraft carriers too. They have submarines. They have a lot of military power. They have tanks and everything, guys. They have it all. What they're really short of, what they don't have, apparently, is the shield. Also, this has nothing to do with Israel, guys. The Iron Dome, the Israeli defense system, David's sling, the laser there, the iron beam, as far as I know, are still here, 100%. We're talking here about the American stockpile that defends the Gulf countries. Remember that Israel sent the Iron Dome to defend the United Arab Emirates. Do you remember that? Maybe it's not a coincidence, but because of this shortage in American stockpiles. And without a shield, every new round of fire against Iran means the Gulf countries are exposed. That's the truth. Gulf allies exposed. Refinery exposed. That's the truth. If you've made it this far, folks, and understood this part, let me know. This video already deserves your like, even if you're one of those who hate the United States and Israel. Leave your dislike too. That also helps the video a lot. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell, because on a weekend like this, things can change in an instant. Guys, it's just a matter of time. Just a quick detail. There's a cabinet meeting today. One of those small ones that happen in Israel here, not over there in the United States, which will take place in a secure location. Tonight, could this be a sign of something that's going to happen overnight? I don't know, but it was reported by the press and I'm bringing this information to you. I wouldn't mention this if the local press hadn't reported it, but there's a meeting today with Netanyahu, the defense minister, and other government members in a secure location. Why? No one knows. I need to make another important point now. Everything that follows is just a hypothesis. Pay attention. It's a line of investigation, let's put it that way. It's not a confirmed fact, but it's a line that deserves to be considered because the sequence of events is just too strange. Go back with me to last month. The Memorandum of Understanding with Iran, that 14-point document that didn't hold up, remember that? It didn't even last a month, not even the first day, guys. The negotiators were all named, everyone remembers them, right? Witkoff, Kushner, Vance. Everyone remembers. The American vice president was leading this negotiation together with the president's special envoy, his son-in-law, Kushner. For weeks, it was the vice president who showed up to defend that document, even on podcasts, guys. He went on podcasts, he spoke to newspapers, he went everywhere. Only Vance showed up everywhere. He gave interview after interview to every possible outlet, guys. He came forward saying that the agreement was going to work. Everybody remembers that. And then, out of nowhere, for no reason, the document just turned to dust. The 13 nights of fire began and the vice president just disappeared. Do you remember that? He vanished. And he disappeared from the news, disappeared from interviews. The ones who appeared in front of the cameras throughout this latest escalation were the American Secretary of War, Peter Hegseth, and Marco Rubio. The vice president simply vanished. And now we get to last Friday, the day when the full-scale offensive against Iran was scheduled, and the vice president reappears. Who was inside that meeting? The American press couldn't specify. They mentioned important advisors and military chiefs, but they didn't provide a list of names. What analysts in the region are focusing on is the calendar. His silence lasted exactly as long as the military path was winning and ended on the day she appeared. And on that same day, on Friday, a problem arose that no one had brought up during 13 straight days of fighting. The problem of the stockpile of shields. Guys, let's break it down here. Shield is the problem apparently, but it's not an attack weapon. There are too many attack weapons. There aren't that many shields. Within minutes, the operation was cancelled on Friday. I'll repeat, this is just a hypothesis. I'm not stating anything. The American press also mentioned this. But analysts in the United States and the region interpret it is much simpler than it seems. Pay attention and you'll understand in 30 seconds that 14-point document has an owner. Do you agree with me? It has an owner. It was negotiated, signed, and defended by a specific group inside the White House, right? Let's say here, Vance's group. While the document was active, this group led. They solved the Iranian issue at the table without deploying troops and were already saying it, right? Vance 2028, right? For the next election. Remember that? She was even talking about that. And then the document got dropped. It disappeared and the military side took over. 13 nights in a row of fire. Each one was public proof that the negotiation hadn't worked and that Vance had messed up. That's literally what happened, guys. And now switch gears with me. If force ends up resolving the Strait military force, the document goes down in history as just a piece of paper that Iran tore up. A failure, that's all. If the talks start producing a real agreement again, that same document becomes the draft of the solution. It becomes the document and the beginning of the solution and not of the failure, and then he scores again. That's why, in this view, whoever signed it has a direct interest in holding this campaign back. The agreement isn't just foreign policy for this group, it's their product. And there's another detail that reinforces this point. The American press reported this month that the Iranians sent a private message specifically to the vice president during the talks in Switzerland, complaining about the other negotiators, that is, about Vance, about Kushner and Witkoff. This means that Tehran had already chosen who they preferred to talk to inside the White House. If this turns out to be true, this will really change the game, folks, because it stops being a military decision and becomes an internal dispute being resolved on the Iranian chessboard. Pay close attention to this next layer. It's the most important one in this video. Who's applauding this whole story about weak air defenses? The Shiite Axis. The American article about the stockpile of interceptors simply became, guys, the most shared topic on Iranian channels. Everyone's been talking about it since yesterday, and on channels allied with the regime, and also those Arabs who support this regime, the Shia Arabs, not just the Persians. They're spreading this around like a trophy, like an unimaginable joy, almost like a real victory. In the end, it is a victory for them, right, guys? A victory of the drone over the interceptor. And it didn't stop there. There's also a video going around of a Gulf soldier, a soldier who ended up in the hospital. He was interviewed, and he spoke out saying that the American batteries in the region aren't working properly and that missiles and drones are getting through the shield. And then the possibility was raised that maybe Iran is developing cheap, simple missiles and missiles without sophisticated GPS guidance that are able to get through the American missile defenses. And the regime's channels also published today that the tunnels, bridges, and transport routes hit in southern Iran have already been reopened ahead of schedule. That is, everything the United States destroyed during. I'm talking about roads, not factories or headquarters, since those can't be rebuilt, but everything else would already be fixed. The message they want to send is just one. The shield of the West failed and Iran didn't feel a thing. And here's where my take on this story comes in, because when the enemy enthusiastically spreads news about your weakness, there are two possibilities. Either the news is true and they're really celebrating, or they're working to make you believe it either way. Most of the time, it's a bit of both. And there was also someone waiting for that fire that never came. Israel, guys. An Israeli official told public radio today, right, that from here in Israel, the government was expecting a heavy American offensive on Friday night. In other words, everyone was expecting it. Now I ask you, wasn't all of this just a smokescreen and it's going to happen at any moment? I want to believe that. I want to believe that this is going to happen, guys. That's what everyone here is talking about. It was supposed to happen Friday. The government really was expecting it. It was on everyone's radar here in Israel that this was going to happen early Friday morning. And the night passed in absolute silence. Absolute. This explains a lot about the mood of the trip that starts tomorrow. I'll return to this about Netanyahu soon, guys. Because there's a huge difference between an ally who is informed and an ally who finds out there won't be another big war, a major incursion through the news, guys. That's basically what happened. And before anyone confuses a pause with peace, just look at what the other side is saying while all of this is happening. The Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council declared that actions against American interests will continue until the enemy's total surrender. American surrender. Actions will continue, but there are no attacks right now. One person makes a statement, then another responds elsewhere. There is no attack now, but he said they will continue until the enemy fully surrenders. This is the official language of the regime on the same weekend that it sends the negotiator to talk with Oman in Tehran. Out of one side of its mouth it negotiates, out of the other it promises total surrender. And now I'm going to tell you here what I think about all this, and you can once again disagree with me, no problem at all, folks. The version they're selling you is simple. The American shield is gone. But this version, as it's being presented, has holes too. And I'll tell you why. Just by observing what happens here in Israel, folks. I live here, I've already told you that. I follow this closely. The cargo planes haven't stopped arriving in this region for even a single day for months. Every day there are cargo planes arriving in the region. The airlift is operating. Giant planes are landing here in the region all the time, guys. Supplies are coming in. It doesn't make sense for this much cargo traffic to be coming in. And the explanation? If everything's over, right? Is it really all over? But then I looked into it, okay? And there's an explanation that maybe ties these two ends together, and it's a lot more uncomfortable than the simple version. First, here's one side of it. A cargo plane transports what already exists. It doesn't manufacture, guys, an interceptor during the flight. Fuel parts, radar, regular ammunition, all of that you load today and unload tomorrow. Air defense shield, no, okay? You need to manufacture that after some time and then send it. This one takes years between ordering and delivery. So a good part of this air movement may not be new reinforcements. It could be relocation. It's taking from one ally's stock to fill another's gap. It's robbing Peter to pay Paul. Second point, and this is the one I think is decisive, every new interceptor that comes off the American production line already has an owner before it's even made. There's already someone ordering it in advance, guys. Part of it is to replenish the stock in the Middle East, and the other part is reserved for the other side of the world. Where to? To the Pacific. And you know who the Pacific is in this story, right, guys? It's China. So maybe the problem was never the absolute lack of a shield. The problem is where Washington is willing to use the shield it has now. That's why I've said for a while, this was never about the Strait of Hormuz, guys. Never. No one empties the reserve kept for the Pacific to solve the Iran problem. It's not about the uranium, it's not about the ship, it's about who will be armed when the real bill comes due. And the bill is China. And now comes the hard part about what I think of all this. I'm saying this with a heavy heart too. It could be strategy, a shield shortage, or internal White House conflict. And do you know what actually changes? Nothing. Nothing, guys, because all the excuses have already been used. The deadline expired and then got extended by another 5 days. There was already a great productive conversation, just like Trump often said, right? There was already the biggest operation of all, which never materialized on the promised scale. And now it's the stockpile. Meanwhile, the regime remains standing, keeps laughing in the face of the West, and keeps doing the only thing it knows how to do very well. You have to take your hat off to them. Turning talk into time. And time is survival. 47 years doing this against 7 different American presidents. Each of these pauses is oxygen. Each round of negotiations gives the regime breathing room. I'm not saying Trump is weak, guys. I don't think that. He did what no predecessor had the courage to do. No one can say otherwise. He used real force against that regime. 40 days, 13 nights in a row. Now, what I'm saying is something else. There is a limit, and that limit isn't courage, it's ability. Price of oil, tired voter, defense stockpile, exposed ally. And as long as this limit exists, the regime of the Ayatollahs knows exactly how far it can go. And that's where the danger of this pause lies. Let's move on to the other reports. They are só segundo. It seems that the United States and Tehran have delivered their proposals to the Pakistani and Qatari sides for the resumption of negotiations, okay? The latest news that just came out right now. Let's go to the other reports from the day that round out the picture. In the Red Sea, it was mostly quiet with only a few shots fired. After hitting 2 Saudi-flagged oil tankers, the Houthis haven't targeted any ships again for now. For now, folks. But in Yemen, things heated up. There was an exchange of fire between the Houthis and the forces backed by Saudi Arabia in a northern province. Right next to the capital, under Houthi control, heavy fire broke out overnight. The 2 military forces exchanged gunfire, meaning a parallel war is happening there simultaneously. And this is a sign that the conflict has moved from the sea and is now happening on land. It's the most dangerous part. Oil immediately felt this change in mood. The barrel had reached around $101 for those who remember on Thursday, the highest level since May. And on Friday, with the guns falling silent, it dropped about 4 and went back below 100. And Qatar also announced that today it resumes all navigation activities for all types of ships after more than 10 days of suspension. Another sign that really we're entering a pause. When the neighbor reopens the port, it's because he's seeing the same opening I'm showing you. Now, here's the piece I promised earlier, the one few are noticing. Yesterday I told you that Ukraine hit ships linked to Iran in the Caspian Sea, and today things have moved a bit further. An Iranian sailor died in this attack, okay? And Iran has officially summoned Ukrainian diplomats to give an explanation. Honestly, I didn't know there were Ukrainian diplomats in Iran. Okay? I didn't even know they had an embassy there, let alone diplomats. But look, they summoned them to give an explanation. But pay attention to what's new about this. Iranian analysts pointed out that Ukraine had already targeted ships linked to Iran before. These were analysts from Iran itself saying this today, that they had already destroyed ships there several times and the regime had never officially acknowledged it. And today they acknowledged it and promised to defend their interests. There are even people measuring whether the missile can reach Kyiv in Ukraine, and it can. The Iranian missile can cross the entire Caspian Sea and hit Ukraine as well. And the Revolutionary Guard had already warned that any country that helped the Americans would be added to their list, immediately. They mentioned the United Kingdom, Ukraine, and the Gulf countries. In other words, the regime that pretends not to see, right? They pretend not to see, but when they start to admit and threaten, it's because they're preparing some kind of response for their internal audience. Are we going to see Iran firing something against Ukraine? But they're going to get hit too, right? They're going to get hit because Ukraine has an unbelievable drone capability. Unbelievable. 600, 700, 1,000 drones in a single wave of attacks. It's unbelievable, guys. This opens up a new front, right? A new front when nobody needed one in this region. But it looks like we're opening one up. At least now there's an exchange of threats from both sides. 2 dates for you to mark. Tuesday, July 28th. I'm returning to the promise I made to you earlier. The Israeli Prime Minister travels tomorrow to meet the American President at the White House on Tuesday. 7th meeting between the two during this same term. More than he has had with any other leader in the world. And this meeting turned out completely different from what it was 3 days ago. Because when the trip was scheduled, there were US strikes every night, 30 nights in a row, Israel supporting each of those attacks. And now he arrives with the fighting paused, with a truce proposal on the table, once again. And with the US asking Israel not to take actions that would end dialogue. And here's where his background comes in, which everyone here knows. He's the most suspicious of all, Netanyahu, guys. He's the most suspicious of all when it comes to making deals with this regime. He always has been. His view never changed. Talking with Tehran only buys time for Tehran. So Tuesday won't just be a formal photo, it's a meeting shaped by two opposing calculations. That's what's going to happen there. On one side, the president who's holding onto the air defense stockpile and wants guarantees on paper about the strait. On the other hand, the prime minister thinks a pause now would allow the other side to regroup. And who's entering the election campaign here, folks? In Israel, okay? In October. Pay attention. There's a campaign in Israel too. And there's also a human layer to this trip that almost no one is talking about. He also goes to the funeral of the American Senator Lindsey Graham, who was one of Israel's greatest friends in Washington. If you want to know which way this story is going, it's in this meeting. That's where things are going to move, folks. The second thing to keep an eye on doesn't have a set date. They are the technical consultations between Iran and Oman, which are still ongoing at this very moment. That's where the yes or no decision on the strait will come from. If that table reaches any agreement, the final decision falls into the lap of the American president. And the summary of the day is as follows. Nobody mentions the two actual reasons the fighting stopped: thin defenses and political calculation. Iran saw this immediately and also stopped to catch another breath. While both sides hold their fire, no one has answered the only question that matters. Who's in charge of the Strait of Hormuz, guys? Today's Hebrew word is the following. Terutz. Terutz. Here's how it is, guys. Terutz. I didn't put it here to read now. I do that at night. It's pronounced just like that. Terutz means, guys, excuse. It's the excuse that comes up to explain why what was promised hasn't happened yet. Pay attention. This is important. I'm referring to a situation, not a man. And this region has already been collecting excuses. In other words, excuses for months. One after another, the deadline expired and was extended by 5 days. The productive conversation, remember Trump saying that? The diplomatic window, and now the missile defense stockpile. Each of those seemed real when it came up. The issue isn't a single excuse, it's the pattern. There have been many excuses for a long time. Because while the excuses keep coming, it's always the same side buying time. And for me and Guido, time will tell if this time it's different. And I'm here, just like I always said, reporting directly from Israel, from the mountains of Judea, tracking every movement and flight, every decision that will be made in the next few hours. Look at that. Temu and the mall offer cheap shields you can buy with a card. It's a shame, guys. This is really about the arms industry, isn't it? These million-dollar bids, right? Billion-dollar ones to build a single missile. No one wants to sell cheap missiles, and the other side sees things totally differently. The other side thinks completely differently. Let's make some cheap drones. Can you imagine now, you like me here supporting Israel above all else, right? Can you imagine the war that's happening over there in Ukraine and Russia? With those 600, 1,000, 1,000 drones being launched from one side to the other against the north of Israel, against the south of Israel, coming from Jordan. Stop and think about that. And if we end up relying on building missiles that cost millions to intercept those 1,000 drones a day, it's unfeasible, guys. It's unfeasible. It's unfeasible. So the military industries around the world have to stop thinking about profit and start thinking the way these regimes are thinking. What if, right? What if you change the way you imagine confrontation? Instead of high-tech missiles, what if we use small drones that are easy to make? That's how you have to think. That's the only solution for this, because otherwise we've already lost this war before it even started. And Ukraine adapted to this very quickly. Very quickly. Remember that at the beginning they asked for Israel's Iron Dome. They asked for Patriot systems. They still ask. But the number of drones they manufacture today is impressive. Thank you for the super sticker, Aguinaldo. Good afternoon, Davi and Eunice. Davi, I recall you mentioning how costly and time-consuming manufacturing is. War can bankrupt even a superpower. Exactly. One question. In a past live, you said Netanyahu stressed the need for Israel's defense independence. The concern is the dependence on Patriot defense systems. No. Here's the issue with defense independence. Because Israel manufactures a lot of things, but it doesn't manufacture everything. An example is the missile, the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome, some parts are manufactured here. Other parts are made in the United States, and as far as I know, assembly is also done there. The assembly of all of this goes back to Israel. So it depends on the United States. This also depends on independence. The Arrow missile, which is the long-range one, the one that intercepts in the atmosphere, is also manufactured abroad. It's an Israeli creation. It's an Israeli invention. There are Israeli parts in this missile. However, its assembly is done abroad. What he means by independence is not relying on this assembly for anything, not for attack or defense missiles. That's why the iron beam, the laser, was created. To end this dependence on the American government for all of this. In fact, now Israel has also sold defense systems, Barak, which is another defense system, to Greece. I don't know if you remember that. And who intercepted? How do we see that this story is actually true, guys? Do you know who intercepted the Houthi missiles in Saudi Arabia? It wasn't the Americans. It was a Greek defense. Okay? Greek soldiers operating a Patriot battery. They were the ones who defended against the Houthi missiles. In other words, it was a battery that didn't belong to the Americans. Maybe it was sold by the Americans, but it was operated, by the Greeks on Saudi soil. Just so you have an idea of how much truth there is in what they're saying about this story of a lack of air defense missiles. Write this down. They'll keep stalling until Iran blows itself up. And around the same time, they'll announce an alien invasion so everyone can be led by one government. Ronaldo noted, yeah. An account here for us. I can't read it right at the beginning, guys. The comments, because I'm talking here. Exactly, the situation is really bad, Angela. It's impressive. Are you guys following the fires in France and Spain? 270,000 people evacuated. Every year it's the same thing. It seems that in Spain the fire was deliberately set. Who can grasp the human mind? I'm following that, and I also followed the attack that happened yesterday in Germany, right? What a peaceful citizen, right? That citizen from the religion of peace drove a car right into the middle of the LGBT parade. At a gay parade in Germany, I'm not sure which city, there was an attack where one person died and 17 were injured. And the guy, I think he's already been arrested, and he's from that religion of peace, right? The one even LGBT people themselves support. In Germany, this happened last night. Good morning. Friends, this is the live stream. Hold on a second. Ukraine already offered a $4,000 drone hunting drone, and Zelensky offered one for $80,000 with immediate delivery. Not sure why Trump hasn't bought it. Another country already has. It's very simple to understand. Fabulous. That's the problem I just mentioned. The military industry controls all these governments, man. And he's not going to buy a $4,000 drone when his own industry makes drones for $50,000. The guy stops making a profit there. He's going to lose out to the Ukrainian industry. They will never let that happen. Neither Israel nor the United States. That's the biggest problem today. That's the biggest problem, to make it cheaper. They don't want to sell anything cheap. They want to sell something very expensive to the government. That's it for now, friends. If anything major happens in the Middle East, I'll return immediately. Otherwise, I'll be back later with more updates. From Israel, I'll also discuss Syria's president and possible normalization with Israel. There's a lot going on right now about Syria as well. It's important to share this with you. I'll mention this in tonight's live stream. Hugs to my friends. See you next time.